Okay, I think it's time we got started. So, welcome to my presentation on JIRA integration in LabVIEW. My name is Chris Roebuck. I'm a LabVIEW architect, a test stand architect, and I work at Konrad Technologies in the UK. We're over in Europe, or at least we are for now. Going backwards there. So, is this presentation for you? If you are using JIRA and you'd like to find ways to integrate it better with LabVIEW, then absolutely. If you're curious to know what is this JIRA thing, then absolutely stay. But what I will say, there's lots of great presentations running at the same time, so if you don't think that fits you, then please vote with your feet. I won't be offended at all.
You will be late,
So, quick disclaimer. This project is not finished, and that's part of the story, especially the user-facing stuff. So, some of the UIs might look a little unpolished. This project is not well documented. This project is a great example of feature creep. What I started out writing several months ago now is far removed from what I've actually ended up producing. I'm sharing it because I want to get a sense of its relevance. This thing's already eaten a lot of my time, and I want to understand its relevance, its opportunity for being used within the community, and more on that later. I'm sharing it because I want to get ideas about features that it must have for you to consider whether you would use this tool. So, what is the minimum viable product for this? And this presentation might run on very long or short, which is highly convenient.
Either way, I'll finish it.
However, the code all works. I was aware of, let's say, a little bit of flaky Wi-Fi and internet in this building, so I've taken the liberty of recording videos of everything that you will see. But everything you will see is running LabVIEW code. So everything you see is available right now. The APIs are palletized-able. Most of them are on the palette, have nice-looking icons, have some kind of description about them, but I say most of them, not all of them. And I started working with the Tools Network yesterday at about 5:30 to figure out a way to get this to you as quickly as possible. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my JIRA integration toolkit for LabVIEW. I even created a logo. I thought we should do this properly. But before we kind of get into, let's see some code in action, let's talk a little bit about the history of this thing. Well, NI Week 2018, I did some thinking. I did some drinking, but I did some thinking. And what I was interested in was how could I integrate JIRA better into my workflow? I was a JIRA user. I was becoming more proficient with it, maybe not as proficient as I would like, but I was still very conscious of its disruption in terms of my workflow. I would tend to immerse myself in LabVIEW code and actually find myself making handwritten notes of all the JIRA tickets that I would need to go and create at another point in time. So I wasn't really using it, or it wasn't complementary to the way I was working. This project's really, certainly for the last few months, been worked on just in my own spare time. And there's been more than a few stumbling blocks along the way. I've learned an awful lot, and hopefully I'll share some of that with you at the end. But I've learned an awful lot along the way. But I wanted to make my, bottom line, I wanted to make my issue tracking workflow more integrated. So, quick show of hands. Who in the room is using JIRA on a regular basis? Okay, that's a good percentage. So this slide's probably not going to be the most relevant, but let's just take a quick look for those of you who aren't using JIRA regularly. I'm going to talk while this is playing, but basically this is it's just running on a virtual machine, so performance is not all that responsive. It's just running on a little, I've got my JIRA installation, but these videos are a little bit laggy. So this is my JIRA installation. It's an issue tracking and task management tool for software projects. So I've got a number of projects that have been created in JIRA. I've got a number of tasks that I need to perform as part of delivering those projects. So for example, I've got a backlog of work that includes tasks where we've got the blue icon. That's a task. I've got where the green icon that you see here is, that's a user story. That's a behavior that fits a particular use case for my project. And then I've got what's called an epic, a collection of tasks that all logically group together. So I've got a number of issues that I've created, a number of tasks that I've created via this dashboard. I'm able to assign them to an individual. Unfortunately, they're all assigned to me. And they have a status. They're either to do, in progress, or done. You'll notice this is just a test project for the purposes of this demo. Pretty much everything apart from one task needs to be done and hasn't yet started. So we're able to track those tasks. We can allocate time to them. I can look at all of the related tasks that are in the same epic that are all in some way related. Maybe in this case, these are all related to my JIRA project provider. And what we can also do is create sprints. So we can say, okay, for the next 1 week's duration, 2 weeks duration, I'm going to be focusing on these tasks. And under the kind of the agile methodology, I wouldn't look at anything else. I would just focus on those tasks. So you can see we've got a nice, highly visual interface with JIRA that allows us to look at what work and to plan what work our team needs to do. So I'm just going to let that, I think we're pretty much there. Yes, I'm just going to, so in terms of a sprint, I've created a 1 week sprint here, and it's drag and drop. I can drag the tasks into that sprint and say, okay, for this period of time, this is what I want to work on. I can just drag those tasks in. And there's my sprint board. I can see at a glance what tasks are to do, what tasks are in progress, and what tasks have already been completed. So it's a highly visual interface. So I was working with that via this dashboard. But my way of working with it was to, that video started. So my way of working with it was to create a task. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new task, not an issue, not a story, not an epic. I'm going to create a task, something that needs to be done. In this case, I need to add some code to the VI that's called file 1. Don't call your VIs file 1, just don't do that. So I would create the task and then go to the JIRA page for that particular task, assign it a person to actually carry out that work. Guess who's going to be doing that one? So I'm going to go ahead, assign that task to me. And then what I would do is, if I need it to have an interconnection between a piece of code, i.e. file 1, and that JIRA task, what I would actually do would be to put a bookmark on my LabVIEW block diagram with the URL of that JIRA issue. Of course, everybody using LabVIEW bookmarks? Show of hands. Great. Okay, so LabVIEW bookmarks also support URLs. So we can paste that URL into a bookmark. If I click on it, it will open in my default web browser and take me to the JIRA issue. So there I've got my relationship between a VI and an issue that needs to be done. Some code needs to be done to that, completed on that VI. So I've got my interconnection, but that's a bit clunky. That means me coming out of LabVIEW, going into JIRA, doing something in JIRA, coming back, pasting that URL, which may affect more than one VI, into several locations in code. Open those VIs, put the bookmark in. It's not a smooth process. So I started thinking about how could I make that better. What I will say is, this is a really interesting read, by the way. So this book, I referenced it yesterday for a totally different reason. I'm referencing it today because there's a book by Joel Spolsky. It's called Joel on Software. For those of you who weren't in my presentation yesterday and don't know, Joel Spolsky is the creator of Stack Overflow, the founder at Fog Creek Software, who create the FogBugs product, and Trello. I'm sure most of you will have heard of Stack Overflow. And Joel has a chapter in his book which is called Human Task Switching Considered Harmful, which is basically saying anytime we need to switch context, anytime we're moving, in this case, from LabVIEW into a browser window, it's disruptive to our workflow, and it has a much bigger effect than you might imagine than just switching between two windows. The example he gives is if we've got two tasks and we process them sequentially, let's say, for example, task A and task B, and they take 1 minute each. If we process them sequentially, then we've got a 20-minute duration in total. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you might think, well, multitasking has got to be a good thing. I hear it all the time. My operating system multitasks. My husband's multitasking, all those comments that you hear. And it's kind of intuitive. You think multitasking must be more efficient. But actually, if we multitask between task A and B, the overall duration is the same. But when we multitask, now task A doesn't get completed until after 19 seconds. Now, that's what Joel's kind of take on this task switching is. But I thought I'd kind of look at, well, how does it affect me? What does multitasking and task switching do to me? So I had a look at my workflow. And it was typically, well, I'd be in some LabVIEW code and realize I need to come back and fix this. I need to add a feature to this LabVIEW code. So I'd go into JIRA and I'd create a task saying I need to add some code to a particular file. And I'd create my JIRA ticket and I'd go ahead and assign it to somebody, and I'm in my web browser, but I've context switched. I've come out of LabVIEW and I've gone into my browser window. And well, I'm going to go ahead and assign it to me. But while I'm waiting for the assignee dialog box to pop down, I'm going to open up another tab because I'm like to use my time as best I can, and browse Reddit, and go on and have a little browse on Reddit while I'm in there, and then get a little bit bored while I'm waiting to log into Reddit. So let's go and do something else. What else can I do that's productive while I'm waiting for my JIRA assignee to log in? Well, so for me, coming out of LabVIEW has just burnt a huge amount of time just in that context switch. I needed to find a way to stop coming out of LabVIEW and to spend more time in the environment that's not disruptive, and not fire up Slack windows as well and add comments in Slack. And, oh, let's go back to YouTube and see what we can find. So I need to find a way to not task switch. So about this time, I discovered, I already knew about this thing, but I thought, well, maybe a project provider in some way. If there's some way that I can actually say, okay, this VI, I need to raise a JIRA issue against it, or I need to at least set a reminder to create a JIRA issue. So I looked at the project provider. So hands up, who's had a play with project providers? Okay, a few of you. So I thought it'd be really helpful in this presentation, as I've just spent 3 months of my life playing with project providers, I thought it'd be a really good thing if I could provide some tips if you're thinking of using a project provider in your next project. Yeah. I'm actually only 25 years old. This is what project providers have done to me, okay? It was a challenge, but the first thing I did is I decided, well, I needed to create a bookmark project provider. Let's find a quicker way of me taking that JIRA URL and adding it to a VI. I don't want to open the VI in the project, paste a bookmark in. So I decided, well, there's got to be a better way. What about if we created a project provider in LabVIEW that allows me to add a bookmark, but also add a bookmark to multiple VIs at the same time? So I did that, and I found that that was a really neat way of being able to actually go ahead and do that and add that bookmark into multiple VIs. What else do I do in this video? I think I got, yeah. And I wanted a way to actually be able to add pre-written bookmarks as well. I thought that might help me if I had some pre-written bookmarks that could be defined in an INI file that I could then add into my project. So that was my first foray into project providers. I then discovered that JIRA has an API. It has a REST API. There's the documentation page. Helpfully, they provide documentation for not only the current version of the API, but every version of the API, and they don't often differentiate between the two. So that makes it a little bit challenging, but they do provide an API, and that API returns response data or query data in JSON format, and I found this really cool tool on the LabVIEW tools network for parsing that data, which made it really easy to actually query my JIRA installation and actually get information back out of it, and conversely, put information into JIRA. So I took these JSON tools and decided to create a JIRA project provider. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So in this instance, I've got the same two VIs as a common theme developing for this demo. There's the same two VIs, and this time I want to actually associate that VI with a JIRA ticket or create a new JIRA ticket associated with it. So I've created two methods that I can call. In this case, I want to actually just query what, so I've got a dialog that pops up. I said at the beginning, disclaimer, I know the dialogues are not great. I need to work on that. But I've created a dialog that allows me to select an existing JIRA project, select an existing task. I can filter by status, by assignee, for example. So I might want to just pick all the JIRA tasks that are related to me, or all the JIRA tasks that are related, that are open, rather than a complete list. And notice it created a bookmark that was color-coded. That color reflects the status of that JIRA issue, so that when I look at my code, I can see visually, yep, there's an open issue here. There's something that still needs to be done on this particular VI. Question?
Can you only do it when the VI is closed?
Can you only do it when the VI is closed?
You close the VI, you're right clicking on it, can you do it like that?
I could do it if I integrated it into the tools menu, for example, or the idea was that I didn't want to be, I'm only opening the VIs to show you that they've been created. There's a URL in there and they're color-coded, yeah?
But Roland, if you transition the task from JIRA to the color code,
So we'll hold that one, hold that one. So in this case, let me just jump back because I didn't pause my video. So in this instance, I actually want to go ahead and create a new JIRA task. So I've got a piece of code, and I know that there's something needs to be done with it, but I'm not going to do it right now, so I need to create a JIRA issue. So again, I select the project, the issue type, the thing that's most suitable for that particular task. I can go ahead and give it a title and a description, and go ahead and create the bookmark. So let's see that. So add a comment, create the bookmark, and it goes ahead and creates the bookmark on the block diagram. So we've got a couple in there now. So now we've got a couple of bookmarks that are color-coded red in my block diagram. So I started doing this on my active projects, but again, it's kind of hidden. It's not immediately obvious what tasks, when I've got my LabVIEW project, it's not immediately obvious what tasks I've actually got that are, and their status. So I'm just showing here that when you go ahead and click the URL, it takes you to the newly created JIRA issue. Okay, so that's great, but it's not very visual in terms of I can see they're color-coded. There's lots of issues that need to be resolved, but when I'm looking at my project, how do I know what work needs to be done? So I started thinking about things like icon overlays, and if I'm on, is there anybody from the tools network? Oh, so I started looking. Yeah, I know. So I started looking at icon overlays, and things started to get really unstable, and they just didn't really work that well. So I thought there's got to be a better way, and I think it was VI Technology posted something on Twitter or Facebook last year saying, well, there's the bookmark manager, okay? So take the bookmark manager and go ahead and customize it and make the bookmark manager only show you JIRA issues. So take the bookmark manager and let's go ahead and, I think I've got a JIRA issue in here. Yep, I've got 2 JIRA issues in this VI. I might have other bookmarks in my project. I think I actually go ahead and create one maybe. Maybe not. But I actually want to see, what issues are in there. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and, let's have a look. I've got to remember which video this is. Let me just double check this one. Okay, so I've got some JIRA tickets. They're in my VIs. So I actually want to see what's the status of my project. So I've created a bookmark manager that filters out bookmarks that are not related to a JIRA. So now in my bookmark manager, it takes a little while to populate because obviously it's not just analyzing the project, but it's actually connecting to JIRA and pulling some information back. But now I can see all of the JIRA tickets in my current project, and I can see their status, their assignee. I could pull other information back. That's all I've pulled back for the time. Oh, I have actually pulled back description, but I don't scroll to the right in this video. But I've got the assignee, the JIRA ticket, its status, and I've still got the same filter tool that allows me to say, okay, just show me all the JIRA issues in this current project that are open, or all the JIRA issues in this current project that are assigned to Darren or whoever. So the bookmark manager kind of gave me that visual way of seeing what's going on. Now, again, I'd like to do some stuff with this from a UI perspective, maybe color code some of those things, maybe be able to filter by some different criteria other than just status and assignee.
So did you just use the existing bookmark manager?
No, so I took a copy. I basically took a copy of it. It's open, the bookmark manager. There's a white paper on ni.com that actually tells you how to create your own bookmark manager. So I took a copy of the existing bookmark manager and then basically changed its functionality to say, get me all the bookmarks. Let's see if any of them have got JIRA tags in there. Then let's go and pull the information from JIRA relating to those bookmarks. So it's pretty straightforward. But the nice thing is, without having to then start digging into those VIs. So if I'm actually in code, I've got that visual bookmark, the green or the red, to show me that there's something needs doing. But if I'm just at the project level, I've got this nice overview using Bookmark Manager to show me what JIRA tickets. I'd like to add some color or something more visual. The main thing for me working on this project, and like I said at the start, it's far from complete, but the main thing working on this was to get the functionality and the API. So one of the things that's made it easy to create that project provider, to create that bookmark manager, was to create a JIRA API. I've created a matching API for Bitbucket and a matching API for Git. It's a little hint of what's coming next. But I've created those APIs to allow me to connect to a JIRA instance. There's some demo code provided as I forgot what these things, as a merge VI. Are they still called merge VIs? So I've got a demo that you can look at as well. But the main thing was actually getting the API in place, and that's made it very easy to actually implement a project provider. But then I kind of got a little bit addicted to this stuff and thought, well, there's got to be a way to go even further. So I started thinking about my workflow. When I start a project, I go into Bitbucket, I create a repo. I go into JIRA, I create a project. I go into LabVIEW, I create a project. And I thought, there's got to be a way of improving that situation. So I decided to create a project template where I can create a project template that when I actually set the project and initiate the project, actually goes ahead and does all those things for me. So in this case, I've created a new project wizard that allows me to give the project a name. It allows me to, if I could type faster, it would be good. It allows me to give the project a name and then select where I want to put it, as usual, and then select a source code control provider. So in this case, I'm supporting Git and Subversion. Everybody's using source code control, right? Quick show of hands while I'm waiting for that to catch up. Yay! Those that you aren't. come and talk to me later. So it allows me to create a Git repository. I can choose my ignore files. I can choose whether I want to connect to a remote. So am I going to be just committing locally, or am I going to be pushing to a remote server? If I select remote and the remote doesn't exist, using the Bitbucket API, it creates it. It allows me to select a VI Analyzer config that I can run as a pre-commit hook. And then it allows me to connect to JIRA and say which project in JIRA am I going to use to track tasks associated with this LabVIEW project. In this case, I'm actually going to go ahead and create a new JIRA project for this particular LabVIEW project. So I can give it a name, a description, a key, and go ahead and hit the Finish button when you finish typing, Chris. And it should appear in my drop-down list as now a valid JIRA project. Hit Finish, and what that's going to do is create me a LabVIEW project. It's going to initialize a Git repo for that LabVIEW project and do an initial commit. It sets up the Git ignore, but it also creates that JIRA project for me. So I'm going to go ahead and add a VI, put some code in that VI. So I'm adding a VI, saving it in my project. And now I'm going to go ahead and create an issue. So I've got a brand new empty project, and I'm going to go ahead and create an issue to go in my empty project. So let's create a task. Let's give it a name and a description. So I think, actually, I should give a shout out, actually, for this. So I've been having some conversations a long time ago, actually, probably 2 or 3 years ago, with Steve Watts about kind of project management and doing it all from that LabVIEW environment, and that was really what kind of triggered me. So I'm just going to do a git status just to see, yep, it made the initial commit, there's an ignore in there, and it's gone ahead and created my JIRA project. Let's just double check. So I'm going to go back into JIRA and make sure that there's an NI week demo project that's available to me. Responsive as ever. Really need to get better Wi-Fi. Okay, so let's refresh. And I should see an NI week project that should have a freshly created issue. There we go, NI week, created by me, and it's got an issue associated with it. Sorry? No, it created the project. It created the project, yeah.
Well, it's just that, you know,
And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I am an admin, obviously, on my own system, but it can create a project if you're an admin, yeah. But if you're like the architect of a team lead, for example, then you might want to make sure. And it's a way of ensuring, you know, a lot of projects, people write a lot of code before they actually decide to initialize a Git repo, for example. You know, they've created a hierarchy of code, and the first commits tens of VIs, hundreds of VIs, for example. So it's a way of saying, okay, I want to make it easier for them to not opt out of VI Analyzer, make it easier for them to not opt out of VI Tester or UTF or whatever test framework they're using. Make sure they're using Git. Do that initial commit for them. If there's a remote, it's configured for them. So that I think the fewer things people have to do manually, then it reduces the temptation for them to not do them. Yeah. So it's created the JIRA project. I've not mentioned, not really mentioned, you've not seen me log in at any point. That's because while I was recording these videos, it was already set up. I thought I should come back and mention authentication, but also I mentioned earlier along, there are a few bumps along the way. So when I started this project, Atlassian, JIRA supported this thing called basic authentication, a password username pair, OAuth, SSH, and obviously if you're using single sign-on. I pretty much bet the farm on basic. I just concentrated on basic and getting that up and running, and then they went and deprecated basic authentication. So that kind of set me back a little bit and made me realize that I should provide for those other authentication types. So what I did is I created a connection class. So my JIRA API has a connection, and if somebody wants to go ahead and override that connection, they can override it if they've got some code that handles the single sign-on. If they've got some code that handles SSH, then they can go ahead and override. So just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to go ahead and rerun my new project video, but this time I've deleted the credentials, so it's not going to automatically populate all the lists. So there's two ways of entering the credentials. I've got a credentials manager, and it knows whether there's anybody authenticated with JIRA or not. And depending on how I'm trying to access this JIRA integration, it determines how I enter those credentials. In this case, I've no longer got, this is actually, there's a behavioral change between these two videos. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new project. So you notice the right-click options weren't available to me because I'm not authenticated. So I'm going to go ahead into the new project, create a project, do my usual setup, select a Git repo. But just while that's playing, has anybody worked with the new project wizard at all? You don't count.
You need to create your
You're on project templates here. So I'm going to go ahead, select my VI Analyzer config. Let's pick a config. And now when I go to the JIRA tab, it should ask me for some credentials this time. So it's going to go ahead and ask me for a username and an app key. Notice I don't asterisk out the app key, certainly not in this screen, because to have generated the app key requires that I've already logged into JIRA and generated it via the web page as well. So at that point, I'm relying on the fact that to generate that, I'm using JIRA's inbuilt security via the web page. So I'm not hiding it at that point. I've entered the credentials, and now I've got access to all my projects. So that's the one way to do it. The second way is I decided that people might want to just use the right-click option and not the new project creation wizard. So I re-enabled, I decided to have a behavioral change, re-enable the right-click menus, but this time pop up a dialog asking for the credentials to be entered before the right-click menu works. So why did I do this? Why did I go to all of that trouble with project providers, which are horrible? New project creation wizard, why did I do that? Well, I'm obviously nuts, but I wanted to know about the LabVIEW project provider. I wanted to know about the new project templates, but I really needed to find a way to actually stop myself looking at cat videos. I just needed to reduce that context switching. The more time I can spend in LabVIEW, the better. Lessons learned along the way. Set some scope. I started out just wanting to create some right-click options to create new JIRA issues. That was literally all I wanted to do. In the end, I ended up writing an API for Bitbucket, for Git, doing that whole piece of work around the new project creation. It just carried on growing exponentially almost. Not everyone respects APIs. The JIRA API has changed in the course of the last year while I've been working on this. There's been a number of changes to things like how you can query user information, for example. So when creating a new issue, ideally I'd like the option to be able to create and assign. Some of those options have become significantly more complex. Not always with the most advanced notice either. Some of the guys that I chat with regularly have heard me ranting about how Atlassian have changed the API, and I didn't know about it. Providing abstractions where there's a choice to be made. So I really kind of bet the house or bet the farm on the basic authentication. I really didn't have a good feel for what people were actually using to authenticate to JIRA. So I just went with the kind of the default option, but actually talking to people, there seems to be a real even split between people who are using SSH, basic authentication, or even single sign-on. So there needs to be an abstraction there so that people can override with their own implementation.
Did you do anything with single sign-on?
I did do. I've not got anything in this presentation. If you want to talk about that afterwards, I'm happy to talk about that. That wasn't fun, if I'm honest. But I would also say don't embark on project provider development without a good understanding of why. But also support other tools. So I was talking to Jörg. I've obviously based this heavily around Git, Bitbucket, and JIRA. And he said, yeah, that tool's great. I would like something like that. But I use GitLab. Somebody else might use GitHub. I've actually already supported Subversion. Obviously, not with local side commit hooks, because they're not available to us. But I've already implemented the Subversion package for that as well. But I would like to support other tools as well as JIRA, because there's some great issue tracking features in those other tools. I know that there's a lot that I still need to do. I might look at project overlays. I'd like to see something in the project window. I don't even know if they're still available in 2019. I believe they've now been switched off. But you can choose to opt back in. I might look at that. I know that the UIs need a lot of work. Like I said, I concentrated on functionality in creating, retrieving issues, information from JIRA, creating projects in JIRA, creating those tasks. I'd like to support other source code control tools in my holistic, let's go create a new project wizard. I'd like to support Mercurial, for example. And I'd like to support GitHub and GitLab in terms of source code repositories and in terms of issue tracking. But that's a lot of stuff to do. I'd also like to obviously support pull requests and automated builds using Atlassian Bamboo. Just kidding, I've already done that. Come see it tomorrow morning at 9:45 in this room, and I'll talk about automated builds using Bamboo.